I was watching this video last night, and basically it came to my attention, me and my girl's attention as we were watching it, that this person, I'm not gonna say their name, big psychedelic YouTuber, but this person, uh, basically it's like they have a problem with understanding that there are fun psychedelics, quote unquote, and not fun psychedelics, quote unquote. And what I mean is, I'm not one of those guys that thinks natural is better, but I am one of those guys that thinks natural is different. Meaning, I think there is a huge difference between natural psychedelics, completely plant based psychedelics, and semi synthetic or fully synthetic psychedelics. I think there's a complete difference. Same thing with natural molecules, any type of drug, whether it's opioids or GABA antagonists or whatever the fuck they are, or synthetic molecules. I think there is a difference. It's not one is better than the other. Natural is not better, synthetic is not better, but I think they're different. So like, and I do think that, so if you created DMT, this is the DMT molecule. Okay, so if you created DMT synthetically, completely synthetically, then I think that it's still the same as the completely extracted version from like a root bark or something. I think they will feel that they are the exact same. Now, there's a difference if you take this molecule and then add something to the top, add something here, then add something here. Um, it is a synthetic. It's now semi-synthetic. I think there was a difference. I think that in the psychedelic community, we don't really explain that um, plant-based molecules are harder to control. It's harder to push them in the direction you want to go. With plant-based molecules, whether it's LSA, compared to LSD, or whether it's 4-ACO DMT compared to psilocin, whether it's I don't know, the N bombs, 2C. If you compared 2CE, 2CI, those things to mescaline or DOE or DOM, if you compared all those to mescaline, mescaline is the harder one to control than compared to DOM or the 2Cs. Now, in my personal opinion, I feel like this is because the semi-synthetic molecules have less of a personality. They have less of a strong personality that can overpower yours. You know how, like in the real world, right, in the human world, there are some humans that have a stronger personality that can literally overpower your personality, or vice versa. Maybe your personality is so strong that it overpowers everyone else's personality around you. Um, but it's one of those things, the same thing I feel like happens with molecules, right? That an old molecule has a little more personality and a little more power than a younger molecule, or a molecule that was just created synthetically, or a molecule that was created based on the evolution of the plant and based on, the evolution of the planet. Is different than a molecule that was created by a human being, whatever. And like I said, I don't think natural is better and I don't think synthetic is better. I just think they are different. With this being said, I think there's a huge problem with humans going to drink ayahuasca, humans going to take ibogaine, humans going to take Hawaiian baby woodrose seeds, humans going to take peyote, humans, I think with those psychedelics, even salvia, that's a huge different thing than 2CE, 2CI, MDMA, LSD, and all the other lysergamides like LSZ, or all these other semi-synthetic molecules. Or now there's this one called BK2CB, I think it's called. And then there's 2CB fly, and there's all these different molecules, right? I think the semi-synthetic ones and the synthetic ones are in one category with MDMA and all that shit. Because even though MDMA is not a psychedelic, it's psychedelic-ish. MDA is more psychedelic than MDMA, but MDA is still not as psychedelic as LSD. But those are in a category of their own. Like, you can still have deep experiences on LSD. You can still have deep experiences on 2CI and all those molecules. You can have some deep spiritual experiences with the N bombs and all that shit, right? it's just not the same as the mushroom experience, the ayahuasca experience, the Hawaiian Baby Wood Rose or Morning Glory experience, the peyote experience. They're not the same. So because they're not the same, I think that um, some psychedelic people, and I only say psychedelic YouTubers because they happen to be psychedelics, psychonauts that happen to record their trips and talk about it, right? And talk about what they experienced and what they learned and all this other shit. I think people go into ayahuasca, go into these things, whether it's they want the ayahuasca to heal them or whether they think they're going to see visions or whatever the fuck. But the truth is, unless you have no trauma to deal with, then you're in for a fucking ride. That's what the plant-based psychedelics do. I don't really have much trauma to deal with. I dealt with all my trauma. I figured out this thing with psychedelics that if you deal with your trauma before you trip, right? Like, I dealt with my trauma, I faced my trauma, I figured out what the problem is, I cried, I shattered, I let things go, yada yada. And then the next day, I did ayahuasca. And then I only dropped a small tear during the experience, but it was a beautiful, visionary, like, immersed experience, right? But all my trips are like that. So I've done DMT hundreds of times, and N dimethyltryptamine is the one I've done hundreds of times. I've never even done 5-MeO DMT, but what it seems like is the more simpler the molecule, the more shattering it can be, or something like that, the deeper it can be. Now, I don't know. I'm just I'm kind of all over the place with this talk, but like really, I guess I just kind of wanted to explain that there is a difference between these molecules, right? So like, I don't know. The difference between methamphetamine and MDMA is based on serotonin and dopamine. Like, methamphetamine, like, basically is an almost all dopamine and norepinephrine type drug, right? Where it affects dopamine and norepinephrine and it makes your body release that in the same kind of aspect way that MDMA makes your body release serotonin. But MDMA does make your body release dopamine a little bit. So there's this weird thing where with meth, you have a lot of dopamine and a little serotonin. And with MDMA, you have a lot of serotonin with a little dopamine. And yes, it's a little more complicated than that, but just to explain it simply to most people, that's a better way to explain it. But the real problem is that there's a huge difference between dopamine and serotonin, and that dopamine tends to be this addictive type thing, where serotonin is not necessarily addictive, but if you fire off serotonin too much and use too much serotonin, you will wake up sad the next day because serotonin is used in your body to help create motivation and positive energy and positive thinking and like, I don't know. We are drugs. That's what the human body is. It's a brain that keeps, fluctuating different molecules, and those different molecules we call body hormones, but really they're just drugs. And we need to be careful on how we're exploring with these things, right? If there are people who will sit there and do MDMA like every week, right? But then sit there and complain that they don't understand why they're so sad all the time and they're depressed and they're suicidal and they have no motivation and they don't know what to do with their life. And it's just a simple answer that you're only reacting that way. You only have the sadness and shit because you're using too much MDMA too often and it's affecting your serotonin. Now, if you know this, maybe you should take something that can bring up your serotonin when you're not on the MDMA. So then therefore next time you take MDMA, it's not as hard of a sad crash thing, it doesn't last as long. Or maybe you should just lay off the MDMA. Same thing with opiates. I mean, you could sit there and take an opioid every single day, 3 times a day, and become physically addicted to it to the point where if you stop, you feel like your body's dying, right? You're just in so much pain and it's fucking horrible. But if you know this, then don't take it every day, right? It's a very simple way to avoid these problems. Ibogaine, right? Ibogaine is this giant psychedelic, and it's the African psychedelic they call it. But like, really, Ibogaine is a lot deeper than most of the psychedelics we're used to. We're used to fun, colors, love, man. Like, that's what people think when they're using these things. But if you wanted that shit, then you should go over to this side of molecules, the 2Cs, the LSDs, the whatever, and the MDMAs and all that shit, right? If you want the peace, love, and happiness and colors, dude, like, if that's what you want, that's what you should have, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, I fucking love that shit, right? I love to take LSD and have a beautiful fucking wild time. I love to take MDMA, and it's fucking amazing. Life is great. But I also love these things over here. I love to get punched in the face. I love to shatter. I love to cry. I love to be scared and terrified. I love the terror of the organic tryptamines. I love the terror of being put in my face that I don't know as much as I think I know. I love being proven wrong, and I just love an ego shatter. You know, it's fucking beautiful. Because after it, I feel amazing. I feel like I'm in control of me again after an ego shatter. Sometimes with LSD or MDMA, or sometimes with those things, afterwards I feel like it empowers my ego sometimes. Like, sometimes I feel a little more egotistical after an LSD trip than anything. But with mushrooms, like after a mushroom trip, that shit'll punch you in the face and be like, yo, you think you're the shit? Bro, you better watch yourself. Like, you know, you need to take care of yourself. You need to be nicer to people. You need to stop being a dickhead. You need to, like, that's what the mushrooms and the tryptamines will do. Like, ayahuasca will fucking terrify the shit out of you if you're not walking in your true authentic self. You have to be your true authentic self to fuck with the tryptamines like that. To dive deep with them. They're not what this world is kind of saying. Like, ayahuasca got popular, mushrooms are getting popular, tripping in general is getting popular, but like, I think we need a bigger understanding of what these things are. And like I said, there's a difference between the plant molecules and the non-plant molecules, but they're still psychedelic, and they still will have the ability to teach you and help you. But like, with the semi-synthetic molecules, you have a little more control than the plant-based molecules. The plant-based molecules tend to have their own intention. Like, when you go into the psychedelic experience, you tend to have an intention, or why are you doing it, right? If you're just doing it to see colors, that's fucking fine, bro. See your colors. But you should probably see the colors on LSD or the 2Cs or something like that, because you'll still see colors on mushrooms, and you'll still see colors on DMT, and you'll still see colors on ayahuasca. But the problem is, there's going to be a lot more of a deeper understanding and a deeper thing to those colors. That, like, maybe, you know, maybe you were abused as a child. That might come up. You know, if you were abused as a child, I mean, it still might come up on LSD, but you still have the ability to be like, yeah, whatever, I'm going to have fun. Yeah. But with ayahuasca or mushrooms or ibogaine or something like that, if you were abused as a child, if you have too much ego, if you're an asshole to people, if you treat people like shit, if you're mean to people and you have no idea about it, these things might put those things in your face and show you the problem. So I just think there's a big difference between plant-based psychedelics and non-plant-based psychedelics. And yeah, and this kind of stemmed from, I was watching this video last night, and this dude was talking about this. Well, he was talking about his experiences with psychedelics, and it made me think, well, it sounds like to me he just wants to trip balls, which is fine. Go trip balls. But if you're just trying to trip balls, then you should take LSD, MDMA, things like the 2Cs. Like I said, like, things like that tend to be a little more fun than ayahuasca or ibogaine or Hawaiian baby wood rose seeds or morning glory seeds. Like, these things are not necessarily fun. They're pretty deep. Ayahuasca and morning glories, Hawaiian baby wood rose, they tend to make your stomach feel nauseous and like whatever, but that is part of the experience. That's part of you having to surrender to the plant. You have to fucking get on your hands and knees sometimes, throw up. It's gonna put you on your hands and knees. It's gonna put you down because your ego thinks it's so fucking powerful. You know, sometimes the plant needs to also make you feel sick. So like, so it can have a little more control of you, right? But then with the semi-synthetic molecules, you tend to be able to just flow and do your thing and be like, yeah, man, colors and shit, and that's fine. But I just think we need to understand that what these things actually are and what's going on here. But yeah, that's my video.